Hello and welcome to another video with me, Joe from J.H.Leather. In this video I'll be showing you how to make a phone wallet style case. So for this tutorial you will need a silicone phone case for your desired phone, some 1.5 to 2mm shoulder leather and a closure fittings. I am using a magnet, but you can use a popper or a sand brown stud. So to start with, we're just going to glue the inside bit. So you want basically the inside bit of leather to be bigger than your phone, because we're just going to stick the two bits together and punch our holes through for the camera slot and microphone sort of areas. So you want to do some test bits first to make sure you've got the right sized holes punched. So here I'm just using a scrap bit and I'm just sort of drawing around the inside of that sort of hole, and I'm just going to do some test bits now with the hole punches. So for the camera sort of slot on this phone, I'm basically stacking two different size circle hole punches and then using my knife to cut the bit in between. So this is very much trial and error, and it will depend on your phone and what style, like where your camera is. So this is my work phone, and the camera is like this. On my normal phone I just have two little sort of camera holes just at the top of the phone case. So once you've done your testing and you're happy with the holes that you're able to cut, you want to just draw onto your main bit. So I've just drawn the outline here around the phone case, and I'm just evening it up, making sure it's all straight, and I'm marking the center of that. So again, the key here is to take your time with this. You want to make sure you get it right when you do it onto your phone case for the first time, really. So here I've got it on the inside, and I actually measure where that needs to the speaker slot needs to go a few times. I measure it on the inside, I measure it on the outside, and I think finally I end up here. I put it in place and then mark out with my awl the slot where it goes to, and then using my stitching awl I actually punch this all the way through, so I know exactly where it needs to be, and then I can even it up and make sure it's all straight and nice and in the right place. So I mean, this bit is the most important part of making the phone case, so that's why I've left it as much in as I can, just for you to see, you know, how my method of doing it was and how many times I measured it, just so you know, measure it a lot before you punch it through, just so you don't waste any leather. Right, once you're happy with that, you can now actually take the inside section out. Now this glued a lot better than I thought it would, but it doesn't matter, because basically this bit we're going to stitch the phone case to. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to get our dividers and we're just going to try and draw a line around the inside of our silicone phone case and then mark it out with the pen. You're not going to see this unless you have the phone out of the case, so it doesn't have to be too straight. Basically what we want to do is make sure we can stitch as much of this silicone case to our bit of leather as possible, just to make sure the phone will be as secure as possible. Now here I actually draw around the camera the hole for it. You don't really need to do that, I don't think, on this one, because you've got a little bit of stitching across the top there, but obviously depending on your phone case depends on if it's possible. So I'm going to actually use my strap pricker here. You can use a stitch marker. You can, if you want to use a little drill with a tiny like 1 or 2 mil drill bit, you can do that as well. Or because it's silicone, you don't actually necessarily have to do this because your awl can go all the way through. However, if you are using a harder case with like a harder plastic outer bit, you will need to use a teeny drill bit to make sure you can get all the way through without cracking the case. So as you can see, I can just awl through this, through my marks. But like I said, you don't necessarily have to mark it out like that. You can just awl straight through it. It just makes it a little bit easier. So once you're happy with that, you can now stick your silicone case to your inside section of your phone case. And remember to stick it so that basically we're sticking this to the grain side, so it's the nice side facing out on your final camera build, or your phone case build even. Once it's all stuck in, you can now double hand stitch your phone case onto your piece of leather. Okay, so once you've got to the end of your stitch, and you're going to do a back stitch and a half, and then you want to leave your threads long on the back side of your leather, because we're going to basically tie these off around the stitches just to make sure they are nice and secure there. So what you want to do, just put your needle under the stitches and then back through, and then through that loop that you leave, and tie it off nice and tight, and then cut off with your scissors. So basically going through underneath the stitches, leaving a loop twice, and then going through the loop and pulling that thread nice and tight. And once you've done that, you want to use your bone to just flatten these stitches as much as possible, just to try and reduce the amount that will possibly show through over time with the leather wearing. You can also use your tack hammer like I have, just to flatten those stitches down as much as possible. And so once you've done that, you're going to want to cut your leather to size. So basically I've added about 3/16 around the phone case. So you want 3/16 to 1/4 inch is enough for this, and mark it all the way around with your ruler. And then using your head knife you can cut this to size. And you want to nick the corners of the inside length of the case, and then we're going to number 1 edge tool around the case, or just on that edge even. We're going to basically do the rest. Once we've trimmed the case at the end, we will go around and do the rest. You can also do it now if you want. I'm just choosing not to do that at this moment. So once you've done that, you can stitch mark this side. However, in hindsight and after making this case, it would be neater and just as easy to stitch this line onto the outer case. Yeah, that's what I would do doing it again. This is the first one I've made, so we're going through this one together. Once you've done that, you can then pop it on to the outside section of your case, and you want to just draw around the edge of the case and make sure it's all nice and straight and lined up, and then you can transfer these marks onto your outer case and get everything lined up ready for cutting out. So once you're happy we've got everything nice and straight and lined up, you can now cut this section out. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use a round object and just make those corners nice and round there on that one side of the phone case for the moment. And we're now going to stick this side of our phone case in. And I'm now just going to use a stitch groover just to draw this line down next to where your phone case section ends, just to make it so it folds a bit nicer here. And once you've folded it over, you can then mark where your other one or the other side of that will be. And then using your ruler, you can sort of make sure it's nice and straight by pushing against that with your stitch groover, and that should just make the turn like on that fold edge there just a bit easier to make. And then once you're happy, you can mark the overall size of your case by, well, I did there, I just had it folded in half and marked where the edge of the case was, and I'm just making sure that this is the same on both sides now. And you can now cut this with your head knife, and then again using our round object, we're just going to make these corners nice and round here. And you can trim off any excess also from the inside section of your phone case too. You can also do this right at the end, it doesn't matter at what point you do it. And we're now going to fit our magnet clasp. So we'll basically mark out the centre and then the distance between the two legs of our clasp, and then you can mark on above and below that centre point to make sure you get it nice and even and centre on that side of the case. And then using a sharpened screwdriver, you can just punch this all the way through. And you can now fit your popper. And what we're now going to do is with our scratch wheel, we're just going to mark around that magnet, and then we're going to stitch mark all the way around this, because basically what we're going to do is we're going to stick a thin patch of nappa leather and stuff that I normally use for padding, or if you don't have any of that, you can just use a thin bit of leather that you skive down, to just stick over the top, just so it doesn't scratch anything on the inside, and it will just make sure that that popper, that magnet even, stays in place. So now I'm going to make the tab end of the closure fitting. So basically I'm just measuring the magnet here, and then I'm going to add about 1/8 either side of this, and we're going to make a little tab for the end to go on. And then using a round object, make the end of your tab round and cut this with your head knife. And you can now measure up and fit in the second half of your closure fitting. We're doing this on the grain side because it's going to be a lined closure fitting here. We're going to stitch another bit onto it. And so there I was just putting it in place and measuring the length that I wanted for it, and then once you know that, you can cut this edge with your head knife, and then with a round object, draw around it, and then cut that also. And then you want to, number one, edge around the whole of the grain side, and then you just want to stain this, and then we're going to now glue it onto, oh no, sorry, we're now going to fit our fitting, and then we're going to glue it onto this backing piece, which it will then be stitched onto eventually. So you want to make sure you glue this to the flesh side of your lining bit, so once it's all done and cut out, you will have both grain sides sticking out. And then cut around this with your head knife. And number one, edge around the grain side on the what will be the outer side of your tab here. And we're going to stitch mark this all the way around as well. Once you've done that, we're just going to stain the whole of the case and around those camera slots as well. And then we're just going to stitch mark all around our case. So we're going to stitch mark around like two sections there with a gap in the middle. So at this point, if you were going to do your stitch on the outside for that edge of the side holding the phone case, you will mark that in now as well. Basically, you want it about the same width in from the edge from as your normal stitch marking would be onto that inside. So you may just need to measure it up a bit just to make sure you've got it at the right distance, and then stitch mark around your case. And so once you've done that, you're just going to attach your tab here. So I have already scribed the last about 3/4 to 1 inch of the end here, and I'm just going to make sure to stick that in place. So this one we're going to stitch straight through to the silicone case inside. So obviously I've not pre-auled or pre-marked that out in any way, but because it's silicone, it can just get auled straight through, like I will show you here. So basically we're just going to stitch the tab on just that sort of end bit first, and then we're going to put both of our needles just onto one side and stitch the rest of the tab separately. I hope that makes sense. I don't think I'm explaining myself very well. So here, look, we're going to start by stitching all the way through the leather and the silicone case. So if you wanted to stitch this half of your case first, you can do, and then stitch this on afterwards. I've just chosen to do it first. So when you get to the bit where you want to stop stitching to the case, basically you want to bring your needle from the inside out in between the layers, and so you can then stitch just through the tab as normal. And then continue stitching this tab as normal. So there are a couple of different ways you could stitch this tab on. Like, first of all, you could stitch this side of the case and then stitch the tab on afterwards. You can also stitch the tab, the end which isn't going to be attached to the phone case first, and then just stitch the bit that is going to be attached to the phone case straight through without needing to do any sort of needles through different pieces. If that's easier for you, I just chose to do it this way, just so I could stitch the whole thing on with one thread, basically. And once you get to the end, you want to do your 1.5 back stitches. And once you've done that, we're now going to stitch around the bit supporting the back of our magnet. Okay, so once you've done stitching around your closure fitting, you can now stitch the silicone phone side of your case. So I've just pre-awed the area under the tab here just to make it a bit easier, because this bit can be a bit fiddly. But like I said earlier, if you wanted to have stitched this bit in first and then stitch the tab on afterwards, that's fine. Once you've finished stitching around the edge of your phone case, you can now stitch down the inside on the phone side. Okay, so we're now just going to trim off the excess on our supporting bit behind the magnet. So you can do this with your head knife. Obviously you want to be quite careful here that you don't cut all the way through to your main leather for the case. And once you've done that, you just want to get another bit of leather now for your inside pocket on your case. So basically you just want to have with one straight squared edge, and you can number one edge the grain and the flesh side, and then just stain this edge as well. So once you've done that, you're just going to roughly mark out where it's going to be, and then just glue very close to the edges, because basically this is going to be a pocket once it's stitched in. So you just want to glue sort of close to the edges here, being careful not to get any on the actual edge of the leather, and then gluing on your insert bit also. And you can just stick these two pieces together, and then you're going to double hand stitch all the way around. So you're going to do double hand stitching as normal and stitch around the whole of this side of the phone case. Okay, so once you've finished stitching, you can now just trim off the excess on this side of the case. And then flipping it over, we're just going to trim or nick the corners very carefully with our head knife here. And then you want to number one edge all the way around the inside of the case. Now we're just going to restain and do our finishing touches. So I've used the red thread here, so if you are using a contrasting thread with a dark coloured stain, you just need to be a bit careful when doing your finishing staining, just to make sure you don't get any of that dark stain on your threads. And remember to stain in and around those holes we made where the speakers and microphone and camera holes are. So here you have your finished phone case wallet. If you like the video, please click the thumbs up button and subscribe for more videos and tutorials. Also, if you have any suggestions of videos that you might want to like, which you might want to see, please leave a comment down below and I will add it to my list of videos to make. Thank you for watching.